Hey, this is Jay Watts from Merely Human Ministries. I believe this is season 3, episode 7. Welcome.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go.
So, last episode I said we will talk about the change of the Republican platform. Man, the news cycle is insane right now. Who knows what will have already happened by the time this is released? We were talking about it before we started airing. We had the change of the Republican platform. Then we had an assassination attempt against candidate Trump, former President Trump. Then Joe Biden, we finally confirmed, was as the end result of the worst debate performance in history, has stepped down in his bid to be elected president. And almost immediately, and what many people anticipated there would be a more drawn out fight that was going on, almost immediately, Vice President Kamala Harris has become the presumptive nominee, getting the backing from everyone and raising record amount of money the first day that she's announced, closing the gap on Donald Trump as far as the polling goes. Trump had surged somewhat against Biden over those last few days, and the confidence in Biden had started to wane across the board. And Biden dug his heels in and said that President Biden said he's not leaving the campaign. Ultimately, they pulled money. They held money, which that's the end for everybody. Once they hold, and then we're not going to belabor this subject too much today. It's not of particular interest to me as far as the area that I study the most. But I will say this. People withhold money in every area where money is necessary to keep things running properly as their way of making sure the decision that they want to be made gets made. And oftentimes, let's go to churches. I was talking one time to a pastor who was run out of a church, and he was sharing with me the painful experience of having your congregation decide that they've had enough of you. Not the whole congregation, just enough of the influential people. And one of the things that they did to assure that this pastor would ultimately be leaving was they continued to tithe, but they tithed into a private savings account. And all of the people that were a part of this group that wanted to get rid of this pastor would tithe into this private bank account. And they let everybody else in the church know, we're still tithing, we're still giving, we're still being faithful in our gifts to God, but we're reserving them because we don't trust the leadership of the church right now, so we're putting them over there until the right thing is done. The right thing is done. And said that was the way that they ultimately won in removing him as a pastor. And then I talked to a couple of other people, and this is not uncommon. There's actually a playbook on how to get rid of your pastor at a church. And it involves things like this. It's not just hateful phone calls and death threats, which do happen. Gotta love the church sometimes. But there's also more calculated moves like this, and it's the withholding of money that ultimately does it. Joe Biden was president of the United States. He had already secured the candidacy in the general election. There was nothing anyone could do outside of a conventional revolt to remove him from that position. But the way that they ultimately educated him on what he was going to have to do was when, with the money, the people who give the money to make campaigns work came along and said, there will be no money for your campaign. We want you to step down, and we won't pay for you to continue. And that combination is the end. I mean, as soon as I heard they were withholding money, I knew it was over. Because they aren't going to withhold it forever. They're going to set it aside until they get what they want. And without the money, you just cannot campaign. Campaigns are largely fundraising events right now. The people who raise the most money and spend the most money usually win. And there was a record amount of campaign donations raised the day that it became clear that Kamala Harris was going to be the nominee. By the way, she's a wildly unpopular vice president. So the idea that she is the rallying point of the Democratic Party is going to be interesting to watch it play out. Now, she's going against Donald Trump, and he is a wild card in and of himself. I do think that, what's the comedian? John Mulaney, is that his name? Is that a comedian? Now I'm blanking. My kids love him. That sounds right. I may be wrong, but he did. My kids make me watch a lot of his stuff, and he did a bit one time about watching President Donald Trump was like watching a horse in a hospital. He said that it wasn't always crazy. Sometimes it was just weird. Like the horse took the elevator, and he said, I didn't know a horse could do that. So he said there was something interesting, and not to insult former president and current candidate Donald Trump, but to say that he's a wild card, I think, is an honest representation of him. It's difficult to know what he's going to do. He's a difficult man to predict. And as we talk about, and before we move on to the rest of the show, I wanted to talk for 1 second about that assessment of the worst debate performance in history. I do think that there's something fascinating about President Biden allowing the delusion of his supporters to infect him in the decision-making process that led to an early debate. Now remember, this was a presidential debate prior to the convention, so neither one of them have actually officially secured the nomination from their parties. It was presumptive, it was true, they were going to be the two candidates, but neither one of them has officially secured that yet. The party nomination process had not been completed. But they decided, because he did so well at the State of the Union, which, by the way, I thought that was the most outrageous exaggeration I've ever heard. If you went into that with the lowest of expectations, then I'm sure you walked out thinking that Joe Biden was electrifying and moving and emotional and in command and in control. He looked better than he has. That was really the end of it. But they were so deluded about what that meant that they decided, let's get to the debate season early, let's set the stage. And then not only did they put them, they set up a series of rules in the debate. For example, that former President Trump's microphone would be muted. Both candidates would be muted while one candidate was talking to prevent interruptions, which sounds like a great thing if what you're worried about is Donald Trump interrupting you and you think those interruptions are bad for you. But in reality, those interruptions are good for you because it makes him look unreasonable when he can't be quiet and he keeps interrupting you. When you turn his microphone off and then allow President Biden to ramble on and say the crazy things that he's prone to saying nowadays, and then cut to him, and as he's reasonably waited his turn, he has the opportunity to say, I don't know what he was saying. I don't think he even knows what he was saying. That was such a powerful moment. And then whatever anyone said coming out of that was the soundbite of the debate. And that's something that is so important. If you watch a debate, particularly if you watch a debate and you have a rooting interest, you're going to have a tendency to see the best moments of the person you're rooting for as being better than they actually were, to see the worst moments for the other side as worse than they were. What you have to do is wait till the next morning and see what sound bites are playing, because that's what stuck with the audience. When we have a rooting interest where it's impossible for us to be objective, but something survives the debate. And the moment that survived that debate more than anything else was candidate Trump saying, I don't understand what he just said, and I don't think he does either. That was it. That moment ended the election, the campaign for President Biden. It was irrecoverable from that moment because it was true. It wasn't just Donald Trump being mean or attacking him. It was just an honest assessment about what had just happened. The President of the United States just said something. I'm not sure what it was, and I don't think he's sure either. I think he's lost. I think he's cognitively incapable of holding the attention that he needs to in his own brain to answer a question completely. And I think as he got to the end of it, he strayed off into some other land, said some few things that don't make any sense. I don't understand what it had to do with anything, and I don't think he does either. Bam, it's over. That moment ended it. And it was all by his own team's design. They set the stage, set the rules, and destroyed their candidate. And there was some people that were still holding out, and some people are still trying to say, oh, well, those aren't important things. The things that he was struggling with are not important. We're not talking about assessing whether or not your grandfather should still be allowed to live in his house or whether it's time to move him into assisted living. We're talking about the most powerful political office in the world. And one of the most horrifyingly embarrassing things that happened after that was when he sent a message to all of the people while he's trying to energize the base and say that the campaign wasn't as bad as it was. I get this message, this alert over my phone from a CNN article that is just being posted that President Biden has informed people that he won't be doing campaign stops after 8 p.m. any longer. I'm like, great. The office of presidency of the United States is now closing at 8 p.m. every night. It can't do that. We can't operate like that as a country. You have to have somebody in office who has the energy to hold that office and to make the decisions necessary whenever they need to be made. And that disaster of a campaign demonstrated that President Joe Biden was no longer that man. I don't think he ever was, by the way. And I don't mean to be ugly about the man. I've had a friend of mine who's been involved in politics his whole life who characterized it from day one as elder abuse. I think that they knew that he was going to be able to get the popular vote in the places where they wanted to be able to get it, to beat Donald Trump in a way that other candidates, particularly Bernie Sanders, was going to have a problem doing. They were certain that this guy would be able to secure the vote, and I feel like Donald Trump obliged him by acting out of control in debates. He set the stage for President Biden to seem more reasonable than he was at the time, more prepared than he was at the time. If you remember how much they hid him up until Super Tuesday from public events, if you remember when they had one of the COVID election events and he was speaking and he thought he was on his phone as opposed to talking into the web event and just wandered off the stage holding his phone, there were signs already that this was not going to be a good thing. We have video of him just wandering around and people directing him because he doesn't really know where he's going. Throughout his presidency, the disastrous bike ride event where they tried to set up a bike ride to make him look healthy and vital and vigorous, and he crashes in to the press corps because he can't control the bike. You see so many times where people in other countries and their newscasts are making fun of the drifting, rambling way that he's talking and questioning what's going on in the United States. Now, they will tell you that they like Biden better than they like President Trump. That may be fine. But with President Trump, they didn't like a lot of things about him and his personality. With Biden, they were questioning whether or not he had the cognitive ability to fulfill his role as president of the United States. And those are two entirely different things. I don't like you. I don't like your policy. I don't think you're fit for office. Those are two totally different things. And newscasts all over the world were questioning the fitness of Joseph Biden during his presidency. So this is no surprise, but it does come off of what must now be recognized as the worst debate performance in presidential history. It ended his political career. That's how bad it was. All right, so let's get on. That was all impromptu. I was not planning to talk about that because I have something so much more important to talk to you about right now. There's a handful of things that you know about me if you know me well. And if you've been listening to this podcast, there are some other things that you may know about me that you don't have to know me that well to know. You know that, number one, if you know me well, you know that Amazon gift cards are the perfect gift for me. I hear all the time and have arguments with people that say gift cards are not personal. And that's why I don't like to give them. I said, if you're giving me Amazon gift cards, it's because you know me. And that is a deeply personal gift because you know how much I love them and what they mean to me. I want those more than I want other things. Because it's not just because I like the idea. You're not just giving me cash. What you're giving me is days for me to have fun. Every year, there are a couple of relatives that give me a nice Amazon gift card, a generous Amazon gift card, and one friend who gives one as well. So I get these three at least every year. And at the end of the year, from Christmas to January 1st, I make a list of all of the different things I could possibly buy with it. And I spend days going through my list. And I got books and I got fitness stuff. And I've got a t-shirt that's got something stupid on, like this one today. I don't think this is stupid, but it's a dragon that says, it's not hoarding if it's books. I love graphic tees. And so I try to find something that I like my Speed Racer shirt or my Captain Caveman shirt or my Underdog shirt. And I try to find interesting things, and I spend days working that list until I optimize exactly what I want. That's what the gift of the Amazon gift card is for me. It's that opportunity. It's that hopeful season where I just know I'm going to get something really cool soon, a bunch of really cool stuff. And I don't know what the combination is going to be yet, but it's going to be awesome. It's like another Christmas for me. It's a Boxing Day miracle. It's a New Year's Day miracle. It's all of those great things. It's a Festivus miracle, although I think technically Festivus comes earlier. So didn't you know I love animals? And I talk about animals on almost every show. But very specifically, if you know me well, you know I love crows. And I've talked about crows on this show before, I believe. I've talked about the fact that they remember people's faces, that they teach the next generation of crows to hate people. We've learned something new about crows, something interesting about them. It begins with someone observing how young human beings process and progress developmentally through their capacity to count. And the earliest for a toddler is they actively can vocalize counting for the first time. The first part of that vocalization is if you show them 3 things or 4 things or 5 things, they will say 1, 1, 1, 1, right? 1, 2. As they start to count, they move through, but they can make a vocalization. They're counting like that. They will mature very quickly to the point where if you say how many of those things are there, initially they'll vocalize one sound for each one thing. And then very quickly they'll get to the point where you can say how many of those things are there, and they'll look over and they'll say 3. And they move past that 1, 1, 1 stage. And so this person who recognizes the shortness of that stage says, I wonder if there's any animals that operate at this level. Any animals that count like this, that can vocally recognize a number of things by making sounds to represent that number in the sense of if there are 5 over there, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. They make 5 sounds. You can count their sounds and get to it even though they're not capable of looking at it and saying the number 5. And it turns out crows can, because crows are amazing. Now, it's not just that crows can do this, and the experiment took some time to set up, but there's an aspect of this that I love more than anything else. They did it, and I don't want to go through all of the details of the experiment, but they would show them colored number, each one was different colored, but a number of different things, and they would say, let's say a pink block, a blue block, and a green block. So they would know that they're distinct things that they're supposed to be counting. And they would reward the crows if they could vocalize the number of things that they saw. Whatever, right? So, JD's laughing at me right now. So whatever, right? So first the crows are confused, and they start flapping their wings, and they're trying to figure out what this person wants from them. And they make a mess. They jump up and down. They get physically active. So very shortly, they start to figure things out. So they start making noise. And the person running the experiment was very excited until, and this is the thing that I love the most, they figured out that the crows were cheating. So what they mean by cheating was that the crows realized that it was somehow or in some way the giving of the treats was related to them making noise. So they cheated the test. Rather than actually look and count and then stop when they got to the right number, they would vocalize with breaks between each vocalization. And when they knew if I just keep making enough noises, sooner or later, they'll give me the treat. And so they weren't actually counting, they were cheating. They would say, okay, how many of those are there? And the crows would be like, treat. There we go. And so they eventually had to change the test parameters so that the crow would have to get to the number that they had accurately counted, stop vocalizing, and then press some sort of signal with their beak to indicate they were done. This is like if you're on the phone and they say, give us the number and then hit pound at the end of it. This is what they were forced to do. And they were able to do it. But you first had to figure out the ways that the crows were cheating you. because they'd figured out how to hack your experiment and get what they wanted without actually doing what it was you wanted them to do. So they did learn. So there's two things about it. Number one, this still continues just my ongoing love affair with crows and how amazing they are. And number two, they're not just smart enough to count, they're smart enough to cheat. So they won't learn anything more than is necessary in order for them to get what they want. And only when you withhold what they want will they figure out a way to pass your test. Crows are simply amazing. All right, so that was the fun thing I want to talk about. So let's get on to something serious now. That's part one, crows rule. Number two, well, that actually ends up being part two because I ranted about the debate for a while, which was part one. So this will be a part three. I promised when we were recording the last one, we're going to discuss the new Republican Party platform. The Republican Party platform is out and available to be read by anyone who wishes to do it. By the way, I encourage every single person to read both the Republican Party platform and the Democratic Party platform. The Democratic Party platform isn't out right now, but the version of it is that will go into the process of being approved. So you can see what they say as well. So both platforms are out. And there was an immediate backlash from the pro-life position, from pro-life people, because they felt like the Republicans were backing off from this. There's been several articles written on this subject as well. Two of them, one by Jonathan Van Maren and one by R. Reno, I think, who's the managing editor at First Things. Both of those published at First Things. Yes, R. Reno and Jonathan Van Maren. R. Reno's was The Republican Party Sidelines the Pro-Life Cause. Jonathan Van Maren, a Canadian writer and journalist on this issue, has written, Is the Republican Party Becoming Pro-Choice? Daniel Darling wrote a couple of nice pieces on this as well. Pastor and author, The Pro-Life Movement Aspirational Moment at the Dispatch. This was not on this, but on this particular subject of the pro-life movement at this point. Daniel Darling's was not particular to the platform, but I wanted to reference his as well. So here's the question. Did the Republican Party back off from the pro-life position? 100%. They absolutely, inarguably did. Now, their reasoning for it we'll get into in a moment, but let's look at a couple of facts that we want to discuss as it results to the platforms. And why do the platforms matter? Let's answer that first. Let's go there. Many, many years ago, I was having a discussion with people within the pro-life movement. And there was a different discussion about what happens when we vote. There were people that believed a vote is a personal endorsement of the candidate. The people who believed that refused to vote for imperfect candidates. For example, if there was a pro-life Democrat, like Bart Stupak was in Congress for Michigan for many years, and there was a pro-abortion Republican, they said, I will vote for the pro-life Democrat because I can't vote for somebody who goes against what I believe in this area. It's too vitally important to me. I need somebody, when I endorse them morally, that I can trust to make the right decisions. So those people said they saw their vote as a moral endorsement of the candidate. Fine. I went to a friend of mine as I heard this argument going on. And then the response to that, by the way, is that we have to vote. We have to be shrewd when we vote. We have to be strategic. We have to recognize that we have an opportunity to limit evil. And if the Republican Party platform is a positive thing and the Democratic commitment is a negative thing to abortion, then even though I have a pro-life Democrat, I need to vote against the Democratic Party. So I called a friend of mine who knew more about politics than I did. He still does. He was at one point a legislative director for a state in the Republican Party. He was an executive director of a state Republican Party. He has run multiple campaigns. So this guy knows politics, knows everybody involved, has been friends with governors and congressional representatives and senators, actively involved in the Republican Party for a good chunk of his life. And I asked him, what is the answer to this question? And he said, what most people don't realize is that you're not electing an individual. What you're voting on is the party platform. He said, that's the thing that most people don't understand. The platform is what matters, not the individuals. The individuals will not have power against the platform of the party. So you need to understand the two-party platforms. And then if you are thinking about voting a third party, you need to understand the third-party platform. You need to read them fully and understand, because that platform will ultimately wield power in an election during the governing phase. Once you get people elected in the office to govern, that's when the platform wields its power. No, and so I'll give you two. I've already mentioned two examples of this. Bart Stupak, a congressional representative, a Democrat from Michigan, was a honored member of Congress. This was somebody he was the head of the Democratic Right to Life Caucus. He was a member of the Congressional Right to Life Caucus. This guy was powerful, was influential. Others would follow his lead. In 2009, when the Affordable Care Act was being put forth by then President Obama, it was meeting resistance, and the vote was going to be razor thin. So Bart Stupak, and one of the things that was in there was federal funding for abortions, and there was questions about that. It wasn't clear. Part of the problem was it was a massive, massive bill that was being put forth, and nobody had actually read it. And trying to parse through all the details of it was difficult. But one thing that seemed clear to people that were reading it was that there was going to be federal funds going to abortion. Ultimately, we were going to start paying for abortions through the Affordable Care Act. And so when it became razor thin, the margins for getting this thing passed, and all Republicans were united against it, the question then became, will you be able to get pro-life Democrats to vote against it? This is the moment that you elected them for. This is the moment that you said, I know you're a Democrat, but you're pro-life. And so I know you'll vote your conscience. So I'm going to put you in office so when the time comes, you'll do the right thing. And first, Stupak tried to find, and the people he worked with, he tried to find a compromise. He wanted to take the Hyde Amendment, which doesn't allow federal money to go to abortion, and make it permanent. So right now it's a rider that goes on to other things and has to be voted on all of the time. He tried to make it permanent as a part of the Affordable Care Act. That vote got through Congress, then went to Senate. Senate said, yeah, we're getting rid of that. And they threw that out, and it goes back to Congress because they made amendments to it. So now Congress has to pass it. And on March 21st, 2010, pro-life Bart Stupak and everybody in the Democratic Party that he had influence over voted to pass the Affordable Care Act into law. There's been books written about this, by the way, and the tremendous pressure that he was under, both from Rahm Emanuel and from Barack Obama. Personal meetings with then the president, larger meetings with Rahm Emanuel, apparently cussing at everyone in the room. All of it to put pressure on these pro-life Democrats to remember the platform comes first. You want to be on committees. You want to be a part of the Democratic Party. You want to be here and enjoy the privileges of being a Democrat in Washington. The platform comes first. I don't care what your personal convictions are on this one. At this point, it's Democrats versus Republicans. You get behind the platform. And it worked. And Bart Stupak and several others, I'm trying to remember if it was the Stupak 10, is that the number of them? But whatever the number was of people that he had influence over at this point, all of them, these Democrats, got in line with the Affordable Care Act, made sure it passed, went against at the time the concerns of the pro-life community, and then ultimately this seemed to have turned Bart Stupak off of being a congressional representative altogether, and he left life. He's a lawyer practicing law right now. Episode 2 Let's go to the other side of this. Susan Collins, senator from Maine, Republican. Very pro-choice. Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, particularly Brett Kavanaugh, because the vote is so close. So close. And she knows, she's got to know that he's being put into office in part to vote against Roe v. Wade. So she calls him into her office. She sits down with him and says, if I vote you in, are you going to get rid of Roe v. Wade? And he tells her, oh, look, I'm a judge. I vote the law. I respect precedent. He can't say yes or no. That would be unethical for him to say I will or won't vote one way or another. But he gives the line, the party line, right? I respect precedent. It's been law for 45 years. All of these things. I'm not going to go in there with an agenda. So Susan Collins, a pro-choice senator from Maine, but a Republican, when push comes to shove, the party leans on her and says, look, you're allowed to have your personal convictions 364 days out of the year. But today you vote to confirm Brett Kavanaugh because that's the party platform. And the platform comes first. These are examples of, now, by the way, Joe Manchin went against his party and voted for Brett Kavanaugh and then ultimately leaves his party as a result of it, because you can't party with them if you don't do what the platform says. That's the end result of going against the platform. You're not one of us anymore. You're out. You've been marginalized. You don't see eye to eye with us. You didn't defend the platform when the time comes. You're out. Make sure you can say it's voluntary or whatever, but we both know you just broke up with us. It was a breakup. That's what just happened. So that's what you're voting for when you elect somebody, according to my friend who has spent his life in politics, has done well in politics. He says you're voting for the platform. So understand what it is that you're voting for. So then it becomes important. Okay, well, the Republicans changed their platform. How much did the Republicans change their platform? Okay, let's look at that just really quickly. The 2020 presidential platform that was originally the same as the 2016, basically the same thing. President Trump's Republican platform in 2016 and 2020 are basically the same. Has something like 500 plus words when it's dealing with the issue of life. Some of them about 500 words, including the Constitution's guarantee that no one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property, deliberately echoes the Declaration of Independence proclamation that all, in quotes, are endowed by their Creator, in quotes, with the inalienable right to life. Accordingly, we assert the sanctity of human life and affirm that the unborn child has a fundamental right to life, which cannot be infringed. That's the language of that. We support a human life amendment to the Constitution and legislation to make clear that the 14th Amendment protections apply to children before birth. That's strong language. 2016, 2020, and pretty much what we've seen for about 40 years in presidential elections. Something like that. It goes on, by the way. I said it's over 500 words. That's not 500 words. What I just gave you is probably about 90. They talk about withholding or withdrawal of care or treatment, including food and water from individuals, disabilities, newborns, and elderly, or the infirm, just as we oppose euthanasia and assisted suicide. It says that they want to pass a capable Unborn Child's Protection Act prohibiting abortion within 20 weeks. We call on Congress to ban sex selection abortions. We think the Democratic Party is extreme on abortion. Democrats almost limitless support for abortion, and their strident opposition to even the most basic restrictions on abortion put them dramatically out of step with the American people. They say that they are resources centers that they want to fund taxpayer funded, or I'm sorry, safety. Hold on, reboot. Because of their opposition to simple abortion clinic safety procedures, support for taxpayer-funded abortion, and rejection of pregnancy resource centers that provide abortion alternatives, the old Clinton mantra of safe, legal, and rare has been reduced to just legal. We are proud to be the party that protects human life and offers real solutions for women. 2016, 2020 platform, 500 words, including discussions of euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, crisis pregnancy centers, a human life amendment, all of these things, right? So how big is the change? 2024, about 90 words. So substantially shorter. And this time those words are, and I can read all of it. That's how short it is. We proudly stand for families and life, capital L. We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights. After 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people. We will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF, parenthetically, fertility treatments. No statement about the inalienable right to life. No statement about the sanctity of human life. No call for a human life amendment. No call for large-scale action to protect the unborn. No mention of physician-assisted suicide. No mention of euthanasia. States are free to do what they want because of us. That's a major step back in support. That's substantial. It's a substantial difference from 2016, 2020 to 2024. Here's, by the way, the Democratic platform as it's been released in the draft. President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats are committed to restoring the reproductive rights Trump ripped away and will pass a law codifying the protections of Roe, strengthen access to contraception, protect a woman's right to IVF, and support access to FDA-approved medication abortion. Now, traditionally speaking, it's still true that if you read the Republican and Democratic platforms, you're getting two different worldviews. You're seeing two different ways of looking at the world. The problem is that however different those two worldviews are, they're starting to converge on the issue of life. They're starting to sound a little bit like each other. Well, sure. I mean, I don't want to be insulting to the Republican platform in the sense that it does say the 14th Amendment to the Constitution states guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process. So it doesn't say you have an inalienable right to life. It says that you can't be deprived life without due process, and that states have the right to establish that due process. How they're going to make the decision whether or not the unborn get to live or die within the borders of that state. Even if you say, well, they're still mentioning the 14th Amendment and they're still talking about they can't be deprived of life, it's not anywhere close to the same statement they made before. It's not even the same family that they made before. Before the statement would have been, all human life ought to be protected. It ought to be protected in every state across. We should amend the Constitution in order to make it so. And now they say, oh, we believe that you should have due process. And if due process says that you shouldn't be allowed to live, what can we do about it? It's a state issue now. It's not a federal issue. Well, that's a lot weaker. But it is different. I'll give you that. It's remarkably different from President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the Democrats are committed to restoring the reproductive rights Trump ripped away and will pass a law codifying the protections of Roe. Those are two different things. I agree with that. And one, they won't want in the federal system at all. And the other, they're saying keep it at the states. And the other is saying the federal government should re-seize this issue and make sure that we have codified these laws and the protections for women to be able to get abortion in such a way that they can never be taken away again. That is the agenda of the Democratic Party. It's on their platform. It's their clearly articulated agenda. It is, in that regards, evil. The other may be compromised, but that one's evil. So the question then becomes, how do we evaluate? Now, here's the thing that I don't like. As I said, it's starting to converge. They're starting to sound alike each other. How does this one end? We oppose late-term abortion. Congratulations. Depending on how you define it, almost nobody supports late-term abortion except for crazy abortion advocates that say things like it always ought to be up to a woman, even if it's the 38th week. Almost no one anywhere of any reasonable moral or ethical background believes that that's true. Almost everybody. So for you to say, we think late-term abortion's a bad thing, congratulations. So does almost every other human being on the earth. Only the most unreasonable abortion advocate would go against you on that. While supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, that's very similar to the Democratic platform. I mean, good. I'm not saying it's bad. That's good. I think that's supposed to be a reference to pregnancy centers. But there again, there's the retreat. There was explicit reference of pregnancy centers in the 2016 and 2020. If that is a veiled reference to pregnancy centers, then it is so veiled as to be useless as anything other than just sort of a backhanded mention. Oh, we don't want people to have to worry about prenatal care. Access to birth control, right there, you agree with the Democratic platform. And IVF, in vitro fertilization, fertility treatments, again, a statement in agreement with the Democratic platform plank on this particular issue. So we're converging. We have dramatically different worldviews in so many different areas, and all of a sudden the Republicans are starting to converge a little bit with the Democrats. Not completely, and still better, because that's outright evil. When you say, oh, we want to protect the right to destroy your children before they're born in every state, all across the country, so that it can never be revoked again. Well, that's not good. These other people are saying, hey, states can restrict it if they want to. You're welcome, right? That's the rock from Moana moment. You're welcome. You can restrict it on the states. Now, there is some good there in the sense that we now have the ability to vote. And there are a lot of states that have passed very restrictive laws. I live in one in Georgia, Texas, Florida, South Carolina, South Dakota. I mean, there are places where you're seeing very restrictive laws come onto the books. And that is the ability of a culture within the borders of their state to say, we reject abortion in this community. I remember speaking at this event, and this woman stood up, and she claimed to be pro-life, but was worried that if the state of Georgia restricted the practice of abortion, people would leave to go get their abortions, and they wouldn't live here. She said, I have friends that said if Georgia goes through with these restrictive policies on abortion, then they'll move to New York. What do you think about that? My response was, then let them leave. Go. Right? If it's important to you to live within the borders of a state that's going to let you kill your offspring before they're born, go. Delta is ready when you are. Get on a plane and fly away. Go visit the community that has the same values as you. And if that value is that you're allowed to kill your children before you're born, then you will be more comfortable there. And you shouldn't be comfortable here because this culture is different from that culture. And that, by the way, is what Vice President candidate J.D. Vance said. He said the different states should be allowed to have different cultures as it pertains to how they decide to deal with abortion. California shouldn't look like Georgia. They're different places, different cultures, different belief systems. So there is that sense that, okay, let the human, and by the way, this was the weakness of the Roe v. Wade paradigm that controlled the country for so long. The idea behind the Roe v. Wade decision was that they were going to take away this fight. They said it looks like to us, in Roe v. Wade and Doe versus Bolt, they said it looks like to us that the country is liberalizing towards abortion. It seems to be slowly moving this way. So if we just go ahead and pick it up from where it is and drop it off all the way over here, then we save ourselves all of this time of having to fight and hash it out. And we make this a much more peaceful resolution. Everybody just has a right to get an abortion if they want to. That's not what happened, obviously. What happened was you took it out of the hands of people to be able to argue about it. And they want to be able to argue about it, need to be able to argue about it, even if we're losing. And that's the reason for the platform change. We lost in the 2022 elections when we didn't expect to. We lost resolutions and amendments all over the country when we didn't expect to in different states. We had defeats in Kentucky, we had them in Ohio, we had them in Michigan. We had defeats that we never expected to become, and they happened in places we never saw them coming. And so it just looks like the pro-life position is unpopular right now. And so there's some pragmatic background. That's what Senator Marco Rubio says, right? There's some pragmatic retreat here. This is just the reality of what we're dealing with, he says. We just have to be honest about what we're dealing with. This is the reality of it. The pro-life position isn't popular. So we're not going to run on it. We're going to run on things that we can win on. And we'll just set this back there. Doesn't mean Marco Rubio or anybody else is less pro-life than they were the day before. It just means that they're planning on not talking about it. Set it aside. There are questions about whether or not that pragmatism is real. We may deal with that later. But right now, what I want to talk about and focus on is what we have been talking about. Now we're stuck with a decision. If what we are electing are platforms, and we have a presidential race, which now looks like it will be candidate Vice President Kamala Harris, versus former president candidate Donald Trump. You don't want to get distracted by them. They're just the picture. They're the front. An imperfect representative of an articulated point of view that exists for anybody that wants to read it. Read the platforms. See what you agree with and what you don't agree with. And as it pertains to abortion, and for anybody out there that's concerned about the issue of life, we do have to recognize, as we evaluate those two different platforms, that they're both imperfect. Very imperfect. As a matter of fact, I think they're both weak. One's evil. The other one's reprehensibly retreating. I don't like either one of them. So now the question is, can I limit the evil of one by empowering the other? That's the decision that we have to make. We have to look deep into our convictions at this moment and say, can I reliably now trust that when push comes to shove, the Republican Party will care about this issue at all? If the single most important document to tell me where they stand on this issue has retreated to that degree, there has been, to some degree or another, a sense that whatever differences that we may have or that any individual may have, at least those people who were interested in the issue of life could comfortably find home in the Republican Party. Why? Because of what I read earlier. Because they had a strong statement in support of the things that are most important to me. And here's the thing as a Christian. What's most important to me is to follow the commands of God. And the great commandments are to love the Lord your God with everything that you've got and to love your neighbor as yourself. Everything and all that you are, all your mind, all your body, all your everything goes into loving God. And to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the great commandment. All other commandments come from those. And so we're trying to find a way to love our neighbor as ourselves and to figure out what that means in the age of this new platform and this new reality. It's only going to get more interesting. We're going to do another podcast next week, and I want to talk more about Kamala Harris, but I need to gather some resources on her because there's more about her and all of the ways that this changes the presidential election process here. All of the advantages that the Republican Party just lost. I can't endorse a candidate here. I can't tell you to vote for one person or another. I'm a 501c3. I'm not allowed to pick somebody for you to vote for, but I can articulate the different views and the different platforms and put them out there as an educational process, which is what we tried to do today. Not to endorse one candidate over another, but to put clearly out there what the two platforms say that they are as it pertains to the thing that is most important to me, how I treat my neighbor. That's the most important aspect of all of this to me. I believe that the unborn are our neighbors. I know I've been commanded to love my neighbor as myself. In order to pursue that, it's going to require me to get involved in politics to some degree, the laws and the way that this community works. I am required in some way to get involved in the politics of my community in order to best produce laws in a society that will contribute to the flourishing of all of the image bearers of God and will help me to put into place policies that will help my neighbor because I love them. And that's my duty and my responsibility as a Christian, to put them and their needs at the same level as my own. Love them as I love myself. Man, that's hard. That's a hard thing. So that's the evaluation process that we're offering. I'm not saying one or the other. You should vote for them. What I'm saying is know who and what you're voting for and know why you vote for them. The platform matters. According to my friend who knows more about politics than I do, it is the single most important thing when you come into this. And we have given 2 cases already where you see the platform winning over the personal principles and convictions of the elected official. The platform's going to win. If you want to know what you're voting for, read the platform. If the platform's retreating on something important to you, take note. It does play a role in how we think about things going forward. Don't fall in love with the people. Don't fall in love with the candidates. They're not the question here. They're not the thing that we need to be keeping our eyes on. And as always, let me go back and finish on this. One of the retreating themes as we get into this election season, as far as for the pro-life Christian, particularly as you see, not just pro-life Christian, I think any Christian that takes the responsibility or duty to love the neighbors themselves, and we get into election cycles and they're ugly. All of them are, by the way, all of them are. All of them. You always hear, every 4 years we hear, this is the most vitriolic campaign the world has ever seen. It's never been this bad. Go back and see the first contested election in the history of the United States when it was John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. It was horrible. The things that they printed about each other, or that they had third parties print about each other, particularly Thomas Jefferson and his cooperation with Benjamin Franklin Bache, and the things that they put into their newspaper about John Adams. Horrible. The first contested elections were horrible things, every bit as awful as they are now. John Quincy Adams, by the way, mocked Andrew Jackson for being illiterate, for being stupid, continuously mocked him. Andrew Jackson, in response to that, was not. And one of the reasons he was able to say that he was illiterate was because Andrew Jackson would spell words differently in multiple different communications. He would never spell them the same. It looked to John Quincy Adams, who was a hyper-educated guy, as if Andrew Jackson didn't know how to spell a word and he was guessing every time he was writing it down. Andrew Jackson's rather famous response to that, I think, was something, I'm going to edit it a little bit, was that it was a dang poor mind that couldn't think of more than one way to spell a word. So they have always been ugly, always been contested, always had people being hateful. Our question is, what do we do in the midst of this? Because this is not our world. This is not, we are strangers here, ambassadors for another kingdom, representative of someone else. I am neither Republican nor Democrat. I am Christian first. And my first duty and responsibility goes to God. And I will always, as best I can, vote my conscience to limit evil as best that I can. But I am not required to carry water for either one or the other or both. I am required to grow in the likeness of Christ, and to do that even when the world around me has lost their ever-loving mind. Let them rage. Let them be crazy. You be like Christ in the midst of it. And it may be that standing up for life right now is an incredibly unpopular position. It may be that saying abortion is evil just puts me on the outskirts of popularity. I just am not going to be accepted by all the cool people for saying that. I don't care. I don't like them that much anyway. They got nothing I want. The only thing I want in this world comes first from God and Christ. That's it. That's what I'm pursuing. There's nothing they can take from me that I want and that I need. And so I'm just going to keep saying abortion is evil and it ought to be restricted. And we'll just keep fighting it and finding clever ways to make that message. And that's why I wanted to end today on something I thought Daniel Darling said back in January so well in his article for the Dispatch. And I will, like I said, I'll make these articles available in links underneath. But this was an article that he wrote, The Pro-Life Movement's Aspirational Moment. And one of the things that he said in that was that we can't take for granted that the younger generation knows this argument, that they that we've made our case to them. It can become easy. Like I spent 10 years going to high schools, 10 years going to colleges. I spent time talking to all of these people, right? It can become easy when you do this to believe that I've done my job. The next generation's educated. Except the generations forget things very quickly. One of the things I thought was so funny, and Tennessee fans probably won't think this is funny, but let's just use them as an example. If you're a UT fan and you love the University of Tennessee, there was a point that if you're my age, you grew up, Tennessee was a powerhouse in college football, right? I mean, they were huge. Johnny Majors and Philip Fulmer, Peyton Manning. Tennessee was a powerhouse in college football. They were one of the schools that people wanted to go to, and they did a great job at recruiting nationally. And so my memory of them was of them being great. And I remember reading something one time where they were talking about recruits. So let's say you start recruiting somebody when he is 15 or 16 years old. It's about, a good recruit's going to get hit at least that early. 15, 16 years old, you start recruiting a kid. They start talking to him, calling them, letting them know they're interested. So that means that person has been cognitively able to remember things on average for 11 years, let's say. They started remembering things when they were 4 years old. So their memory begins when they're 4 years old. But still, it's not going to be great, and they're not going to have deep allegiances when they're younger. So you're going back even just a few short years after that. So it's only been a handful of years that they're actually thinking about all this stuff. The important point of this was there was somebody that pointed out that when you go and talk to recruits at a certain point, they have no memory of Tennessee ever being great. It doesn't even exist. It's like a history lesson that you would have to put on for them, right? You'd have to pull up archive footage and say there was this time, and that's so long ago and not relevant to them at all today. And it's a very short window. They only know the now when you're talking about young people. And we can forget that. We can forget that they only know the now. And the people who are young now, the now that they know has been influenced by the media, and the media is all on abortion advocacy side. They've been influenced by actors. They've been influenced by musical acts. They've been influenced by podcasters. They've been influenced by every level of social media influencers. All of the people that have the largest voice and the largest amount of airtime in their head and in their world are all abortion advocates. They are the people who have their ear right now. They are the people that are delivering the most powerful message to them. And Daniel Darling's warning is well taken. We have to be intentional now about reaching them. What do we do now? We go back to the basics. We make our case. Right now, they don't see the unborn. They see an embryo or a fetus that is robbing rights away from a woman. We have to help them to see that there is a life there that's being destroyed. When they say it doesn't look like us, we have to be able to say back to them, yes, it does. It looks exactly like us. It looks exactly like you and I and every human being that's ever existed looked when we were that age as well. When they say the fetus, the embryo is just something, we have to be able to say, no, it's not a thing. The fetal development stage and the embryonic developmental stage are stages of development that things mature through. And we were all embryos. We were all fetuses. That was us at that age. They are one of us. And when we okay abortion, we okay the destruction of one of us. So it's all right to kill innocent human life. Almost always for the crime of being inconvenient. We got to make that case. They are human. All our biology tells us they're human, and they matter because the best explanation for our experience of equal human dignity is that our value is grounded in our shared humanity. It's the only thing that we all share across cultures, across borders, across religions, across the world, is our shared humanity. They're all human, and all humans matter. Make that case again and again and again. Wake up tomorrow and find a new way to make that case. Wake up the next day and find another way to make that case. Never grow weary of doing good, as it tells us in Galatians. Remember that we have a duty and responsibility to take the message of the love and mercy and grace of Jesus Christ to the world. And for those of us who are advocating for life on this level, we have to remember that we can never take for granted that our audience has heard our message, because our message is only being delivered through very small channels, and the other side's message is being delivered through every avenue that's open to these people all day, every day, 24 hours. So we got to grab what ground we can and make our case again and again and again. Convince them that if we build a society that respects all life, even immature life, it will be better and safer for us all. All right, that's episode 7 of season 3. Next week, we will film episodes talking a little bit more about Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, the way that this all changes, and some arguments that I have been given, some objections, if you will, some people that want me to answer some very specific things. We will revisit those and have fun with that as well. And I will find, I promise you, something interesting about some animal out there. It's just going to happen. All right. And I may talk a little bit about the Fratellis. I don't know if I have or not already on this show. They're a musical group that just falls right outside of my ability to put 3 songs together, the Fratellis. So if you like this show, if you've enjoyed it, please give merelyhumanministries.org, merelyhumanministries.com, merelyhumanministries.net. I think they all take you there. I'm paid up with GoDaddy. Every one of those should lead you to our website. We have the ability to donate there. You can either donate electronically, you can mail something in if you're old school. Either way, it works. And we appreciate our audience. Have a great day.